Welcome to This Explainer. Ever feel like your own brain is just working against you? Well, today we're diving into the actual neuroscience behind a racing mind. And more importantly, we're going to show you exactly how to take back the steering wheel. If you've ever felt completely hijacked by your own thoughts, you are going to want to stick around because this is a real game changer.
We've all been there, right? You're lying in bed, it's 2 a.m., you are brutally exhausted, but your brain, it is sprinting at full speed. Suddenly, a totally random conversation from 6 hours ago comes rushing back. You're analyzing every single word, every pause, and before you know it, you're running through a dozen rapid-fire practice scenarios for situations that are, let's be honest, probably never going to happen. It literally feels like your brain has 50 tabs open, and every single one is blasting sound at full volume.
So let's dive right into this. You know when people tell you that you're just being too sensitive? Yeah, they're getting it completely wrong. Psychology actually has a specific clinical name for this, maladaptive rumination. It is a very real, measurable condition where your mind just gets stuck endlessly chewing over the exact same thought patterns. It usually flares up when you're dealing with uncertainty or maybe past events you literally cannot change, or just really complicated social situations.
To understand why this happens, we've got to look at the data. Research from Yale and the University of Michigan shows that you don't overthink because you're weak. Actually, you do it because your brain has an exceptionally strong ability for pattern recognition. I want you to think of your nervous system like a high-tech military radar. It is always scanning, always processing, always searching for hidden meanings. The problem isn't a lack of intelligence. The problem is just that this radar never gets the all-clear, power-down signal.
Now, here's what's actually going on under the hood. Your brain has a logical CEO called the prefrontal cortex, which is normally in charge of planning and, hitting the brakes on panic signals. But in an overthinking loop, that CEO gets totally overwhelmed. It gets completely swept away by the endless internal chatter of what scientists call the default mode network, or DMN. This background system is the thing that keeps you constantly reviewing the past while simultaneously drafting responses for a future that hasn't even happened yet.
So, the really crucial takeaway here is that your brain is basically like a powerful V8 Ferrari, revving with the pedal absolutely pushed to the floor. The engine is roaring, the wheels are spinning, you're burning so much fuel, but the car is in neutral. You aren't moving an inch forward. No wonder you feel unbelievably exhausted. Your energy is just being completely depleted by the pressure of a mental engine that refuses to stop revving. But let's look at where this all starts. Like, why would a smart brain do this to itself? Well, psychology shows us that for a lot of people, overthinking is not a personality flaw. It's actually a brilliant survival tactic that you likely learned back in childhood to protect yourself. If you grew up with adults who had unpredictable moods, or if tiny mistakes led to harsh criticism, your developing brain learned to anticipate everything. You literally learned to read disapproving looks ahead of time just to stay safe. So your brain is really just doing exactly what it was trained to do.
Okay, so how do we navigate out of this maze? First, we have to separate all this excessive thinking into two distinct camps. Camp 1 is reflective rumination. This is inward-focused, it's solution-oriented, and honestly, it's a high emotional intelligence superpower that helps you process things and grow. But Camp 2? That's brooding rumination. This one is completely passive. It is a silent killer that just crushes your life. It's where you drown in regret and constantly replay arguments just to beat yourself up over them.
And here's the thing, when you quietly cross that line from healthy reflection to negative brooding, overthinking starts sending you a massive psychological and physical bill. It makes you pay with absolutely crushed sleep quality. It makes you pay with analysis paralysis, where you just freeze up at a crossroads and can't make the simplest decisions. And it makes you pay with severe social anxiety, leaving you terrified of saying the wrong thing or being judged.
Now, the really tricky part is that most of us swing between these two states without even noticing. You don't realize you've crossed into brooding territory because of what cognitive psychology calls the illusion of mental progress. See, because your neurons are firing nonstop, your mind literally tricks you into feeling productive. You feel like you're actively solving a really hard problem, when in reality, you're just sweating on a mental treadmill. You're burning energy, but going nowhere.
Which brings us to a super fascinating question. Why does the usual advice to, just relax and stop thinking about it feel so incredibly annoying and completely unrealistic? When someone taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, just turn your brain off, you instinctively know that is terrible advice. And guess what? Neuroscience totally backs you up on this.
Here is the massive plot twist. Your brain is actually being driven by dopamine.
Now, we usually think of dopamine as just this feel-good, happy chemical, but your brain actually releases tiny amounts of it during the process of problem solving. And get this, it releases it even when those problems are completely imagined. Every single time you analyze a risk or win an imaginary shower argument, your brain releases a chemical reward. It literally turns your anxiety into an addiction loop.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why willpower alone fails. It's a cycle. You run a disaster scenario, you get a tiny dopamine hit, you feel a fleeting false sense of safety, and then you just crave more thinking to maintain it. It really isn't much different from mindlessly scrolling on your phone. You simply cannot fight a nervous system that is chemically rewarding itself just for the act of worrying. So telling yourself to just stop is scientifically impossible.
Right, trying to force a stop to this loop is like telling someone with motion sickness to just stop feeling nauseous. It just doesn't work. So how do we actually take back the steering wheel? Well, top therapists around the world don't even waste their time trying to shut down your thoughts. Instead, they suggest changing your relationship to those thoughts entirely. We have to completely change how we interact with the raw data our brain is handing us.
First up, we use a really powerful tool from acceptance and commitment therapy. It's called Cognitive Defusion. Imagine your anxious thoughts are a pair of virtual reality goggles completely strapped to your face, making you believe the disaster inside is 100% real. Cognitive diffusion is the act of taking those goggles off. It's holding them in your hands and realizing, oh, this is just a video playing. It helps you step out onto the shore, rather than being swept away by the toxic river of your own mind.
In practice, cognitive diffusion is incredibly simple, but man, is it highly effective. It involves a tiny shift in your inner language. Instead of labeling yourself and fusing with the thought by saying, I'm a total failure, you just add one simple phrase. You say, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. This tiny, subtle adjustment instantly creates mental space. It completely separates your core identity from the raw data your brain happens to be processing at that moment.
And let's look at the actual biology of why this works, because it's fascinating. This small linguistic shift literally reroutes the blood flow in your brain. It pulls neural activity right away from the amygdala, which is your center of panic, and pushes it straight back into the prefrontal cortex, your logical CEO. You are biologically signaling to your brain that this is just data. It's not a life sentence.
Secondly, we have to recognize that your nervous system is running on outdated survival software from your past. It's constantly assuming danger is right around the corner. Because of this, you really can't use logic to calm it down. It won't listen. You have to update the safety signal for your central nervous system by using the physical language of your body to retrain it.
So when your heart races and that loop starts up, you need to use real sensory experiences. You've got to pull your mind out of that disastrous imagined future and drop it straight back into the present moment. The classic 5-4-3-2-1 technique is great for this. It forces you to process the texture of your clothes, maybe the sound of a fan, or the smell of the room. It basically forces your mind to drop anchor back into physical reality.
Now, for a more direct and immediate intervention, you can literally shock the system with intense sensory input. Splash your face with ice-cold water. Go lift something incredibly heavy at the gym. Doing this sends a crystal clear, undeniable biological message to your brain. It says, look, the environment is totally different now. You are safe, and there is absolutely no predator chasing you.
And this works flawlessly because of a very specific limitation in your brain. The default mode network, that background chatter system we talked about earlier, simply cannot process strong, real-world physical signals while simultaneously running imaginary anxiety simulations. It literally cannot do two things at once. By forcing a strong physical sensation, you are hitting the hard pause button on those mental movies. Ultimately, what I really want you to take away from this explainer is that overthinking is not a personality flaw. It's not proof that you're weak or broken. It is actually evidence of a mind with extremely high processing power. A mind that worked incredibly hard to keep you alive when things around you were unpredictable. The goal here isn't to eliminate your brilliant sensitivity. It's to become a patient, caring guide for your own brain.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to ponder. When your mental engine inevitably starts revving up today, which state are you going to let run your mind? Are you leaning toward constructive reflection, or are you slipping back into negative brooding? And most importantly, are you ready to finally take off those VR goggles? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating topic with me, and I highly encourage you to try these techniques the next time your brain opens up 50 tabs.